Hi, I'm John Green, and this is Crash Course U.S. History. And today we'll begin discussing the work, exchange, and technological aspects throughout American history. So as you'll most likely recall, the Columbian Exchange was a system of trade between the Americas, Europe, and Africa. The interactions between the Columbian Exchange affected America through the exchange of plants, animals, diseases, and other things. Examples of the plants include tobacco, peanuts, corn, tomatoes, potatoes, pineapples, cocoa, vanilla, onions, citrus fruits, sugar canes, bananas, beans, grapes, and a whole lot more. There was also the introduction of domestic animals to the Americas, such as horses, which would aid the Native Americans in farming. The introduction of new crops and animals played an important role in diversifying the culture of the New World and helped support the physical and economic growth of the Americans. While Native Americans received support from new domestic animals, they also received a great amount of disease. These included, but weren't limited to, smallpox, influenza, measles, malaria, whooping cough, and the typhus. As you can imagine, this strained the already poor relationships between the Europeans and natives. Well, distinct economic systems were developed in British North America through the trading system known as triangular trade, which brought many slaves from Africa to America to be used for their labor. This affected the region by increasing the African American population in the colonies. The creation of the Navigation Acts and taxes also caused the colonists to smuggle goods. Now, taxes on colonial trade were nothing new, but the British government had placed taxes on a bunch of items in order to reduce competition with Britain, including wool, hats, and molasses. Wait, not molasses, Stan, molasses! Why would they place a tax on molasses? Well, anyways, those taxes were about trying to regulate trade in a mercantilist way more than trying to pay back the war debt. And they were easy to avoid via smuggling, which we did because this is America. Cue the Libertage, Stan.
It's America.
But mostly, the colonists were angry because they didn't have any say about the new taxes that Britain was imposing. I mean, after all, by 1760, some colonies had been setting their own taxes through their own legislative systems for 100 years. So the taxes themselves weren't really the problem. It was a lack of parliamentary representation. The first oppressive tax, the Sugar Act of 1764, extended the Molasses Act by changing the tax imports from the Caribbean from 6 cents per gallon to all the way up to 3 cents per gallon. After becoming newly independent, the United States was able to create its own national economy through a variety of reasons and factors. Factors such as an embargo forced Americans to industrialize, while people such as Henry Clay attempted to create the American system of economy. Henry Clay's three-pronged system to promote American industry included a strong banking system, a protective tariff, and a federally funded transportation network. This made America a more home-based economic market. America was set into sectionalism through the South's advent of the cotton gin, which brought a more efficient way of weaving cotton and the North's high manufacturing market. The South still saw slavery as a legitimate source of labor, ignoring what the rest of the nation had to say about it, and allowed their devotion to slavery override the country's interest as a whole. It was almost as if the North and South saw themselves as a foreign to one another. This ultimately led to the rise of the Union's worst crisis, the Civil War. So by the 1880s, the Americans had begun to play a greater role in the world's international economy. By this period, the Industrial Revolution has slipped into high gear and placed the United States in an international eye as an industrial titan. One of the first reasons for American growth as an international force was the creation of railroads. With the creation of 5 transcontinental railroads came many laborers and many opportunities for individuals to capitalize. Such individuals include influential bankers such as J.P. Morgan and businessmen such as Andrew Carnegie. This is an example of the disproportional spread of wealth between the upper echelons and the lower laborers, which was justified as social Darwinism by the higher class, which is brings us to the perspective of laborers during the Industrial Revolution. Many laborers were peasant European immigrants who had come to the United States in search of more labor opportunities. While they did certainly receive labor opportunities, they also suffered from harsh living and working conditions. So as you can see, railroads had a huge impact during the 1800s in bringing America's economy to a running start. Let's go to the thought bubble. During the 19th century, railroads grew to become one of the key components of success behind the American Industrial Revolution. They helped boost America's economy by allowing faster and more efficient exchange of goods, and helped provide labor opportunities for American workers. The creation of the American Railroad allowed for the development of the first national brands. Railroads are also seen as one of the first type of modern corporation. They require large amounts of organization, with many people interspersed them working throughout the system. This created different levels of employment that basically grew into the system of modern corporations that we have today. Railroads were also a symbol of relationship between the government and the corporations during this period. Without the government's bonds and the federal land grants, it would have been incredibly difficult to nearly impossible for corporations to gather the funds required to build railroads in the first place. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Indentured servitude, widely used in the 18th century, was a labor system whereby young people paid for their passage to the New World by working for an employer for a certain time period. It was not slavery, but it was. The servants were fed, sheltered, given strict work and resting conditions, and were even beaten when the employer felt so. Eventually, indentured servitude declined because of how easily it was to run away and blend into a crowd. Thus, slavery was on a rise during the 19th century. Slavery was seen as more beneficial because it gave a lifetime servitude and the ability to birth more slaves at will, rather than having a couple of temporary and more defiant workers such as the indentured servants. Slavery began in America in order to have farm aid for the cash crop tobacco. Eventually, the economy morphed into a cotton-based market where slavery was brought to the South where cotton flourished. By the mid-1800s, 33% of the southern population were slaves. After the Industrial Revolution, labor system drastically changed. In the ye old America, workplace was given a random pattern which changed with the advent factory system. The factory system concentrated the workforce in one place, giving an ease of regulation of time and production. The role of employee changed from a dominantly male-skilled population to women and children de-skilled workforce. The de-skilling was an important role in the factory life, moving away from artisans because essentially no background was required and cheaper and better quality factory-produced goods was the product. After the Civil War, labor wasn't limited to the daylight thanks to Edison's light bulb. This staple invention destroyed excuses as to why someone didn't finish their work. Thanks, Edison. Despite the harsh conditions that laborers suffered in the past, during the 1900s, the situation began to improve during the age of progressivism. By the 1900s, Americans were caught up in the reform, which really hasn't been since the 1840s. These reformers, who called themselves the progressives, worked to combat corruption and social injustice that had been rampant during the Gilded Age. Progressivism had a large impact in aiding laborers during the period and greatly improved their living conditions through activist reforms such as staffed commission and a city manager system. Writers were also an integral part of the progressive reform movements, as seen through the Henry Demarest Lloyd's book, Wealth Against Commonwealth, the Thorstein verbal attacks as seen through the theory of the leisure class. However, one of the most influential novels during this era was Jacob Rye's How the Other Half Lives, which provided readers with the shocking images of the horrid conditions that laborers had to suffer on a daily basis. This book was notable for greatly influencing many people. Oh, it's time for the mystery document. Oh, thanks, Stan. The rules here are simple. I read an attempt to identify the mystery document. If I am right, I do not get shocked by the shock pen. And if I am wrong, I do. Okay, what do we have here? The world, enriched by thousands of generations of toilers and thinkers, has reached a fertility which can give every human being a plenty undreamed of even in the utopias. But between this plenty ripening in the boat of our civilization and the people hungering for its step the corners, the syndicates, trust combinations, with the cry of overproduction, too much of everything, holding back the riches of the earth, sea, and sky from their fellows who famish and freeze in the dark, they declare to them that there is too much light and warmth and food. They assert the right for the private profit to regulate the consumption by the people of the necessaries of life and the control of the production, not by the needs of humanity, but by the desires of a few who are The author of this document is obviously some sort of progressive activist, judging from his belief that the necessaries of life are being held from the people by a small group of people. Pair that with a desire for private profit and you have someone protesting against big businesses and corporations. I don't know, Stan. I'm going to have to say this is Thorstein Veblen? What? Henry Demarest Lloyd? Who's Henry Demarest Lloyd? Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're making me do this. During the late 1800s and the early 1900s, big businesses grew to a larger size previously unheard of. As robber barons such as Carnegie and Rockefeller gained more power, they influenced aspects of the economy, forcing it to grow and creating a new Wall Street economy. An example of the might of these titans is seen through the clash between J.P. Morgan and Carnegie, who went face to face in the steel industry. This caused a great amount of back and forth between the two barons, finding ways to undermine each other via lawsuits, financial loopholes, and buyouts. This serves an example of the new fiercely competitive nature of the Wall Street economy. Labor unions were created in order to help the workers with work-related difficulties, such as low pay, unsafe or unsanitary working conditions, long hours, and other situations. These unions often set out on strikes and boycotted buying certain goods from their said company. Also, pushing for American reform was the Populist Party, a political party formed primarily to express the agrarian protests of the late 19th century. In some states, the party was known as the People's Party. The party adopted a platform calling for free coinage of silver, abolition of national banks, a sub-treasury scheme or some similar system, a graduated income tax, plenty of paper money, government ownership of all forms of transportation and communication, election of senators by the direct vote of the people, non-ownership of the land by foreigners, civil service reform, a working day of 8 hours, postal banks, pensions, revision of law, contracts, and the immigration regulations. Furthermore, the progressive era, or movements that took place at the turn of the 20th century until World War I, was directly caused by industrialization and urbanization. This movement sought to improve life in the industrial age by making moderate political changes and social improvements to the governmental actions. They wanted to limit the power of corporations, improve the democracy so it benefited the people, and strengthen justice. America begins to soften up to Mother Nature in the 1900s, like acts such as the Land Conservation Act and formations of the FDA and Clean Air and Water Act. Without scientists showing how the Earth would be in the rate of consumerism it was going at for it in the future, these acts would have never been thought of. The government became more involved with the American economy too. Most notably, FDR's New Deal brought much reform to the American system. The CWA gave unemployment people construction work, the FHA regulated housing and mortgage conditions, the HOLC gave loans in order for people to own houses, and the SSA combated the widespread poverty amongst the elderly. So that in the end, the real question is, how will these things affect the lives of people today and tomorrow? Well, we will be going over flying cars, hoverboards, and time traveling machines in the next episode. See you next time, and as they say in my hometown, don't forget to stay amazing. Thanks for watching.